Right, good evening everyone. We've had a few slight technical problems this evening, but I'd like to start this evening's meeting now. It's 6:04 and this is the meeting of Planning, Transport and Regeneration Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As you know me, I am Councillor John Allen and I am the chair of this committee. I would also like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed and is also being recorded for publication on the Council's website. I'd like to remind you all to turn off your mobile phones if you or have them on or put them on to silent. I would also like to remind members and officers joining us via Teams to mute their microphone when they are not speaking and to use the raise your hand option when you wish to speak. I will give everyone the opportunity to speak at the end of each item. Right, item 1 is apologies for absence. I have received one apology for absence from Councillor Anderson. I do believe he's had some problems starting his vehicle, but he's joining us on Teams. Yeah, Councillor Anderson, you with us?
I am, yeah, everything's okay.
Fantastic. And I've also received apologies for absence from Councillor Van Day as well. Wendy, have we got any other apologies that you know of?
No, there is no other apologies, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Item 2 is minutes. I move that the minutes of the Planning, Transport and Regeneration Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 13th of October this year be approved as correct record. Are we in agreement with that, guys? Agreement from Councillor Potter. Okay. Right. Item 3. Minutes are approved. All right, subject to any amendments. Minutes, yeah, they're all done. Right, item 3, sorry. I have not agreed to any items of urgent business, but I would just like to bring something up quickly, if I could. I know we've got a lot to get through tonight, but I don't know if you're all aware and you've seen the latest publication from Thurrock News that it's under the headlining of Should Council Call Time on Borough's High-Rise Flats as dangers to residents mount and children live in damp and distress in the high-rise flats. I'd like members to and officers to take this away and come back at a later time with this. But with talk of regeneration of the tower blocks and possible demolition, I'd ask, why don't we find a build-to-rent developer who can incur all the upfront costs, including the demolition, and pay us for the land sale also. Lease the properties back to council, where council can benefit from the land sale, the housing stock, but incur no costs. Now, I'd like you to take that away and come back at a later stage with that. Is that okay, Andy?
Chair, thank you. Yes, we will take your request away. I think perhaps just on an initial analysis, this might actually be one, at least in part, if not wholly, for the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee, if it involves our housing stock. But leave that one with us. We'll do that analysis and we'll report back in due course.
Thank you, Andy. Right, I'll move on with item 4. Declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare a declaration of interest? No declarations of interest. Okay, item 5. Now, item 5, fees and charges pricing strategy, the year 2021 to 22. Can I ask the officers to introduce this report, please?
Chair, thank you. I'll introduce this one, and it's a relatively straightforward introduction and hopefully a relatively straightforward report, which sets out the charges in relation to services within the remit of this particular committee to take effect from the 1st of April 2021. The full list of proposed charges is detailed in Appendix 1, and the proposed deletion of some current fees and charges are also listed in the Appendix number 2. To go to the main body of the report itself, things to highlight. Paragraph 2.2 provides a narrative for this particular committee's remit and lists in that section the various fees and charges and the areas to which they relate. Section 3 talks about the broader Thurrock charging policy, which these fees and charges have been devised by. And if you look at paragraph 3.3, you'll see a list of key questions that all areas of the council are asked to consider when putting together the fees and charges, and those are bulleted at the top of page 11. Paragraph 3.4 sets out how, for this particular committee, a number of different methods to tier charges are used depending upon various service areas, with 3 or 4 examples being given there. And at 3.5, a list of some of the key points to be noted in terms of the fees and charges for the next financial year. Finally, Chair, it's section 4 of the report. You'll see a further breakdown under the various areas within this committee's remit in relation to transport and highways, on page 14 in relation to planning, and on page 15 in relation to corporate property and assets. Ultimately, this, alongside other fees and charges, which will go through other scrutiny committees, will be going to Cabinet. But this is, as I say, just a summary of those fees and charges relating to this committee's remit. Chair, I hope that is of use, and if there are any particular questions that members have got, there's quite a few officers here this evening that will be able to answer those from within their service areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for that report. And I will hand over to members. Are there any members that would like to comment or have any questions on this, please? Right, Councillor Anderson, you're up first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Andy. Just out of interest, recommendation 1.2 notes that committee note that director delegated authority will be sought by Cabinet, etc., etc. And this comes to all the fees and charges reports on other committees and all that sort of. I had it on children's the other day. I was just interested, how often throughout the financial year do we tend to change fees and prices using directed delegated authority? What kind of process is it that decides? Is it literally just the decision of a director? I was just interested.
Can I pass that one back to you, Andy? Are you okay with providing response?
Of course, Chair. In short summary, very infrequently, and it is done in liaison with the relevant portfolio holder as well. So it's not just a directed decision; it will be in liaison with the portfolio holder. It's rare, and I'm trying to think of another example. Or of an example in the recent past. The one that comes to mind is in relation to building control, which of course works in an open market alongside the private sector. We have to remain competitive, and there was a review of building control fees partway through either last year or the year before. Time flies and all that, but that's one example where there was a necessity to do so. But the great majority of the fees have longevity throughout the financial year.
Great, thanks, Andy.
Okay, have we got any more members that would like to ask any more questions on this? Over to you, Ollie.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, not quite sure if my hand was showing there or not on the screen. I guess on a similar vein as Councillor Anderson, I guess the kind of nervousness from my point of view on allowing sort of delegated authority to vary fees and charges is just the level of democratic oversight. And I think what would be appropriate is just an undertaking that any of those potential changes would be reported back to this committee for review, just to make sure that there is the oversight of the the overview and scrutiny committee before those are implemented. And final point from me on page 23, we've got the removal of a charge on advertising on bus stop timetable cases. I wonder if Andy or another officer could maybe just explain a little bit more about the kind of the detail underneath that change.
Thank you, Councillor Gerrish. And back to you, Andy.
Yeah, yes. I'm trying to see on my multi-person screen here. Yes, Peter Wright is here. I think this comes from the Environment and Highways side of things. So I don't know if Peter's able to provide a response on that, please.
Sorry, it cut out. My web cut out just as the question was asked. Would you mind repeating? Apologies.
Councillor Gerrish, can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question on detail was just on page 23, and it was the kind of the marked removal of the charge for advertising on bus stop timetable cases. And I was just after just a little bit more detail in terms of the history behind that item and how we got there.
Sorry, yeah, my apologies. Yeah, so that's for A3 advertising. So this is to go in the actual timetable case that goes on the bus stop. That, you know, it's the paper case where we display the timetable. And we've got no room to accommodate an A3 piece of paper. So the charge was sort of, it's one we never applied, but the A4 one still stands, which is why the A4 one remains. It's as simple as that, really.
That's great, thank you. And Andy, the former point?
Chair, thank you. Yeah, I think we can take that one on board. As I said in introduction, the approach to taking through each of the scrutiny committees these relevant fees and charges will eventually filter up to cabinet. So your point, Councillor Gerrish, should be captured in the minutes and will be reported through. I do understand the point. I guess that the counter to that is that whilst, as I said in answer to Councillor Anderson's question, is that these things happen infrequently. It's about proportionality, I guess, and some of them are relatively minor tweaks, but certainly that can be taken on board.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kerrin, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, on page 13, it's got about the parking permits, and I just want to say that personally, I'm pleased that the charges remain unchanged. So thank you for that. With residence permits, which is on the same page, it's proposed to increase the third permit. Why is that? Other than the fact that some boroughs have a more expensive one than Thurrock, but is that the reason why we're looking to increase it, or is it something to do with the budget or anything like that? I wonder if you could just explain the process by which the third permit is going up based on benchmarking. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kerrin. Who would like to take that one, Andy?
Again, I think it's probably Peter's best place to answer that one, if he may. Thank you.
Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, I'll try and answer it on behalf of my parking colleagues. Unfortunately, they couldn't attend the meeting, but it's about benchmarking. So with all our fees and charges, we try to look at what our neighbouring authorities are doing, and I believe with that particular one, it's just really just trying to bring us into line with what our neighbours are doing. Yeah, that's the reason.
Councillor Kerrin, do you want to come back on that?
Oh, yeah, yes, please, Chair. Thank you. Thanks for that. I just wondered then why there's no evidence on here of benchmarking for other things. So, for example, the parking charges that I've just said, like, well done for that. I'm pleased it hasn't gone up. There's nothing on here about benchmarking parking prices, charges with other boroughs. Was it just residence permits that went through that benchmarking, or is it every charge on here? And what's the decision around, you know, matching a neighbouring borough or just staying as we are? Thank you, Chair, for allowing the follow-up.
With regards to the parking ones, it's not within my particular area. So what I might need to do is take that away as an action and get that reported back to you. I can speak to the strategic lead for parking and get you an answer on that if you wish.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just so I know sort of when benchmarking is applied and whether there's examples of us being different to a council, but we've decided, well, it doesn't matter what they do. This is what's right for Thurrock, you know. So, yeah, if further information could be provided on that, I think it'd be reassuring as to how and why decisions were made. So, thank you.
No problem. No problem.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Kerrin, and thank you, Peter, for answering the questions. Councillor Potter, have you got any questions in the chamber today?
No, thank you, Chair.
I'd just like to say welcome to the chamber. You're the only one that turned up today, so it's great to see you. Councillor Gerrish, have you have your hand up again? Wendy's just told me.
Apologies, Chair. It doesn't seem to be able to be sort of put down again this evening, but no further questions from me.
Right, thank you. Right, if we've asked all the questions on this particular item, are we all in favour for this? Recommend? Do we recommend? Yeah, that this goes through. Agreed. Okay. Agreed. Brilliant. Right, that's been agreed. Item 6, we move on to electric vehicle charging. And again, can I ask the officers to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So at recent meetings, we've spoken about how important it is to ensure that future growth is supported by right transport infrastructure to provide sustainable travel options for our communities and businesses, whilst addressing climate change, reducing congestion and improving air quality. Electric vehicles will play a key role in the Council's ambition to tackle climate change, and it's necessary to expand and improve upon the charging infrastructure within the borough to promote the use of EVs on the network as a cleaner and more sustainable mode of transport. The report sets out our proposals for the provision of electric vehicle charging facilities within council-owned assets and on the adopted highway. Chair, with your agreement, I'd like to hand over to Matt, who will take you through the report in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Yes, of course, Lee, and over to Matt, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. As Lee sets out in his introduction, the report is a series of recommendations with regards to what the council's direction will be in regards to electric vehicle charging facilities. As Lee set out, we are focusing more on-street park provision within the adopted highway for the benefit of residents within Thurrock, but also we're looking at off-street provision in and around town centres and key transport hubs as well. The recommendations before you is one for the committee to support the procurement of a single contract over a maximum period of 15 years. We're basically worked out on a contract period of 10 years with an option to extend for a further 5 years, and that will tie in quite nicely with the government's agenda on EV swap out with normal combustion engines by 2035. The second part is to support the creation of a policy to inform the rollout of the charging infrastructure based on a demand-led approach for on-street and off-street parking provision and the upgrade and expansion of existing council assets and in town centre locations and transport hubs, and that the contract value over the next 15 years will be up to £9 million based on the following income areas of a minimum £75,000 per annum, which is over 15 years would be approximately 1.125 million. And that's identified within the Integrated Transport Block Funding, which is our annual allocation from the DFT. Additional contributions secured pursuant to Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, based on local plan projections for infrastructure improvements, and for the council to utilise the government's Office for Low Emission Vehicle grant funding to provide up to 75% of the capital cost for the installation of EV facilities. In order to do that, we're asking you to note the approach to delegate authority for awarding the contract to the Director of Place in consultation with the portfolio holder for highways and transportation. I'm happy to field any questions that you may have with regards to this rollout in more detail. I would pass it back over to you to agree that approach.
Okay. Before we hand it over to questions, I've got Councillor Potter's hand up. Lee, did you want to come back on that, or are you quite happy with what Matt said?
That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Chair.
Right. If I can go over to members now, and first of all, Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully, am I right to assume that children, if they start sort of wandering up to these points and start fiddling about with them, cannot be electrocuted? Thank you.
It's a very fair question. I don't know. I'd like to come. Matt, would you like to come back on that? There's obviously concerns where electricity is, in use, and Councillor Potter has got a very good question there. If children were to go over to these points, are we guaranteed that there's going to be no electrocution from these points?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The infrastructure that is currently in place is well tested and has been around for a number of years. There doesn't appear to be any evidence of issues such as what's been described by Councillor Potter. There are cut-off and safety facilities within these charging units, both within physical hardware and within the software. So please be assured that there wouldn't be any safety issues with regards to these systems at the moment.
Okay. Any other members wish to pose a question? We'll go to Councillor Kerrin first, and then we'll take Councillor Gerrish's after.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for the report. Similar question, really, to the one I asked in the last item. In terms of benchmarking, where are we on this item, electric vehicles? Where are we in relation to both neighbouring boroughs and other unitary authorities and similar councils of our size?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the rollout of EV charging facilities, it's pretty much a mixed sort of situation at the moment. If you go into London, there is around about 7,000 units within the London area that has been increased over a number of years through various means. You look at neighbouring authorities such as Southend, they're starting to get a steady increase in charging facilities, and there are around about 10 to 15 charging units in that unitary. Looking at the wider Essex area, they are very similar to us, as they've only got a collection or a handful of charging facilities. So in terms of benchmarking against other authorities, it really is, we're kind of in the middle. What we do identify is that we do need to exponentially increase the amount of charging facilities within the borough, particularly as we are a transport hub for a lot of areas, particularly when you consider you've got Lakeside as well as a primary attractor for vehicles as well. So this is really seen as a priority in terms of transport development to try and improve the street scene, to try and improve air quality in that area as well.
Okay, I'd like to go over to Councillor Gerrish now, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I guess a question for me on this one is around what exactly we're expecting to be delivered within this contract. So if I'm understanding correctly, on page 27, we're looking at circa £3 million over 15 years, which while it sounds a lot, if you look at kind of typical kind of projects in the borough, it doesn't necessarily sound like something that is actually going to go all that fast. So I wonder, maybe if officers could just spell out, like, what exactly would residents see being delivered across those 15 years as the outcome of this contract?
Thank you, Chair. what we're looking to achieve is the steady rollout of electric vehicle charging facilities in all residential settings across the borough. We're also looking at increasing the usage of electric vehicle charging facilities in industrial zones and commercial areas as well. If I can draw your attention, unfortunately I don't have the page numbers on it, but paragraph 2.8 of the report identifies a breakdown of the contract period over a 5-year block. So we've got 3 areas there. And what we're looking at there is a projected budget allocation per annum, say for the first 5 years, we're around £300,000 per year, which is potential OLEV funding of £225,000 per annum. And that would be a main contract value of about 1.5 million. If you move into the fiscal years of 6 to 10, that increases to about 2.65 million. And then in the last 5 years, so 11 to 15, we're looking at about 2.8 million. So that's why the overall contract value over the 15 years is about 9 million. To put that into context, the average cost of an electric vehicle charging point is between £1,000 and £5,000, depending on where the kit is being implemented. So, and obviously there is an economy of scale that if you are providing a number of facilities in the same location, the unit price drops down considerably because you only need to put the electrical cabling in suitable to get, say, 5 units up and running in a car park sort of thing. So it's difficult to put a fixed unit price because of there's lots of variables with regards to the cabling to get there. But it's a general rule of thumb, it's about £1,000 to £5,000 per unit. So if you extrapolate that up, it's quite a considerable amount of units that we're looking to implement over the 15 years.
Sure. So if I just come back very quickly. So if we're saying approximately £5,000 a unit and 3 million, sort of very quick calculation says that's what, about 600 charging points that we're looking to install?
That's correct, yes. One of the things that we are looking to do as part of the local plan in the infrastructure requirement list is working with developers that are building new housing developments to make sure that they build the necessary infrastructure as they're building the roads, because then that will reduce the unit cost down quite considerably, so we can then increase even more. So yeah, for 3 million, you're probably talking about 600 to 700 units. Over the contract life, you're probably talking in excess of 1,200 units that we could get direct source funding for.
Thank you.
Well, I've got no actual questions myself, but just a comment. We're all aware that these electric vehicles are, they're getting better. The charging times are quicker. They provide more mileage now, better batteries. But we've still got the actual unit prices of the vehicles themselves, and they are very expensive. I believe that a basic model's around about £35,000 now. So we need, ideally, the car manufacturers to bring those prices down, and then that would give everyone, a chance to drive these vehicles. And until then, I don't think the average Joe can ideally afford these vehicles. Right, if we've exhausted all... Sorry, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, it was just a comment from myself, Chair, and that was that recommendation 2 says support the creation of a policy to inform the rollout of the charging infrastructure based upon a demand-led approach. I think that's right. I appreciate that the government policy to phase out combustion engines effectively means that eventually people will have to purchase electric vehicles, but I think it's important to take a demand-led approach on this. But other than that, thank you, Lee and Matthew, for the report.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Yeah, I think if they're given the appropriate, money off. If there was an incentive for people to buy these vehicles, then I'm sure they would. I think government need to bring you know, an incentive. So it pushes us over effectively to electric vehicles. Matt, if you'd like to come back as well, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just come back on the comments that you and Councillor Andrews have both made with regards to electric vehicles themselves. Whilst it's not technically part of this report, I am an EV driver. I do have an electric vehicle. I'm on my second one in the last 6 years. I can tell you that the price of them are going down. There is a government grant that you can acquire. I think a lot of it is that there isn't necessarily the publication of it, but you know they are coming down considerably, and there are a lot more cars coming onto the market. So you know now is the right time for the council to increase the charging facilities, because that does appear to be one of the biggest blocks, is that people are there's a perception that they won't be able to charge their vehicles up because there isn't a lot of facilities about. So you know it really does come to the foreground that we need to get the infrastructure in to try and get people to change out of the combustion cars and into the electric vehicles and see the benefits that they do have.
That's good to hear. Thank you, Matt. That they are, you know, actually coming down in price, and that's great. And let's hope by 2035 that we do go full electric, and they'll be able to provide even more miles, hopefully by then, to a charge. Are we exhausted all questions? Is there any further questions from members? No? Okay then. So if all members are in agreement with the recommendations outlined within this report, is that recommended? Okay then, we'll push on then to item 7, which is the Stamford-le-Hope interchange report. And again, can I ask officers to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report's brought to PTR at the request of members. We last had a paper here, I think, in July this year. Just to update members, the design is progressing well, and with a planning application for the phase 1 works, which is the station side, due to be submitted next week. The concept design for phase 2, which is the transport hub on the Daybreak Windows site, is being discussed with stakeholders currently, with a view to being agreed in the early new year. Tender works are also progressing, and we're expected to go to invitation to tender in the new year, end of January, beginning of February, hopefully. And the programme for phase 1 is currently on target for completion around September 2021. The budget is currently being reviewed. We introduced 2 budget checkpoints in the design, the second of which is on the final design approval. So we'll do a check on the budget at that stage to check that we can deliver the scheme in accordance with the existing budget on the current design. And happy to take questions, Chair.
Lovely, thank you for that, Anna. And open to questions. We've got any raised hands? Councillor Kerring, you can go first.
Thank you for the report. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Anna. On the budget, 3.5, I'm surprised to not see any sort of definite figures. Especially, what I was probably expecting to see was the cap of 20 million. When I raised this item at the last full council I was in, I directly asked a portfolio holder about the budget for Stamford-le-Hope, and it's a matter of record in the minutes that he said it wouldn't go over 20 million. So what I'm asking really, when are we going to get sort of definite figures, and can you confirm as well what was said at full council, that this project will not go over 20 million?
Thank you, Chair. At the moment, the project is expected to be delivered within the budget envelope that we have. And I think the budget envelope that's been agreed is 19.6 million. The second part of the question, until we actually go to market and secure the tender, it's going to be very difficult for us to give any definitive views on the outturn forecast. What I would say is that we are looking to tender this scheme on a fixed price so that we can control the budget and make sure that we can deliver it on time and on budget.
Thank you for. Sorry, Chair. Can I continue? It's just it's slow. Keep putting it on mute and then hand again. Sorry.
Absolutely, Councillor Kerrin. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. So thank you for that answer, Anna. But it appears that 20 million, like the ceiling of 20 million, is still. It seems from your answer is still very much up for debate. That it could be higher. Is that what you were saying with your answer?
I'm not expecting it to be higher. At this point in time, that's not what the project team has reported to me. I'm expecting the whole scheme to be delivered within the 19.6 million. But until we test the market, it's very difficult for us to give you any definitive view, because a tenderer will tender and provide a price based on what they think they can deliver the works from. So it would be a little disingenuous of me to sit here today when we haven't gone to market and say, absolutely, we're going to deliver that scheme at 19.6 million. What I can say is that the work that we've undertaken to challenge and review the budget as well as the scheme is showing that the scheme can be delivered within that budget, and we will be looking at all methods of ways to make sure it is delivered within that budget. But as I say, until we test the market, I can't give you that definitive view. It wouldn't be right for me to do that.
Thank you. And just the final one from me, Chair. I appreciate that answer, Anna. So what I would wonder is what discussions then have been happening between sort of senior sort of cabinet members and senior officers, because you can't give me that guarantee, but it was a guarantee which was said at the October council, where it's actually on the minutes where the portfolio holder said it can't go above 20 million. So I appreciate your answer and the process you've spoken me through, but I just think there's a bit of a disjoint then between the thinking of senior officers and the thinking of the cabinet member. That's what I'm suggesting.
I don't think that's entirely true. Obviously, we report to cabinet members and to the senior management about the on a monthly basis about where we are with the project. We have specifically approached this project in a different way. We knew what the budget envelope was that we had available to deliver the scheme within, and we have specifically instructed our contractors who are doing the design and the work to lead up to the delivery of the scheme, that whatever is designed has to be designed in a way that fits that budget envelope. So as far as I'm concerned, I can report to you as best I can at the current time with where we are in the process, that we are aiming to deliver this scheme within the budget envelope. And what we are doing is testing the market. If the tender prices come back and it shows that the project can't be delivered for less than 20.5 million, then we're going to look at ways that we can value engineer potentially, or other ways that we can deliver the scheme by changing the materials or whatever it may be to deliver the scheme within the budget. But the remit that I've been given is this scheme has to be delivered within the budget, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure that it is.
You know, I believe that you're going to try and do that. I just think there needs to be a bit of a discussion around how this is all communicated, because you're obviously saying to me that you've got to go through this process and you're aiming for it to be, below, 19.7 million. But then you have full council meetings where it said, no, it's definitely sort of not going to go above it. So I just think it's something to sort of take away and to sort of work out what is actually happening. Is it, as you say, that it's something you're aiming for, which I totally believe that you will do your level best to get there, versus the cast iron guarantee that was given in the council chamber and is actually on the minutes. So I'll just leave that with you, Anna.
Thank you, Councillor Kerrin.
Thank you, Councillor Kerrin, and thank you, Anna. Anna, I'd just like to touch on that as well, on this. That I do believe the original design, which incorporated the cantilever, was in excess of 26 million. If you can, let me know if I'm right on that figure. Also, I was led to believe that the envelope that we were going to be delivering the new design was 19.4 million and not 19.6. But following on from Councillor Kerrin's concerns that it would be in excess of the 20 million, I mean, we need to try and ensure that we're going to come in on that budget envelope, even though we've acquired at quite a cost, I do believe, the Daybreak Windows site. But it does look that it's going to be an overall better design as we've acquired that Daybreak Windows site. And it's a much better project now in itself.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the original scheme with the Cantilever podium deck was incredibly high risk and incredibly expensive to deliver because it involved the manufacturing of large steel beams that needed to be laid across the site, and there was the potential for that to interfere with the operation of the railway. So that was going to be a very costly scheme, and that's why the cost estimate for that scheme, when we went to market and tested it, came in at in excess of 26 million. If you remember, the original budget for this scheme was around 16 point something. Forgive me, I don't have another screen in front of me to look up the historic information on my computer, so I'm working off memory. But it was circa 16 million. An additional 4 point something was put into the budget. You might be right, Councillor Allen. The budget may be 19.4. It may be me adding an extra 0.2 million onto it just to complicate matters. I'll have to go away and check the figures. The Daybreak Windows site was acquired. It's in the public domain what it was acquired for. It was acquired for £3.2 million. But in that money has come out of the existing 19 million that we have. And that money actually has been spent with a view to saving money, because what that's enabled us to do is change the design fundamentally, deliver a much improved facility in Stamford. We're not shoehorning the bus turnaround facility and transport hub onto the site in front of the station, which created some issues for the safe movement of pedestrians. What we are now doing is a transport hub across the road that provides more parking. It provides a bus waiting and turnaround facility. It provides a facility for taxis to wait. It provides bus cycle parking and cycle charging points is what we're looking to include as part of the design. So overall, the benefit that's been achieved by spending that £3 million on the Daybreak Windows site is going to result in a much improved facility for residents of the borough.
Absolutely, thank you, Anna. Yeah, it's great. It's great to see that the station should be finished by September 2021, and then we've just got to put a kind of approximate date on the transport site, which is the Daybreak Windows site. Just basically, you know, for the people of Stamford-le-Hope to get this done and dusted, and deliver this. And especially deliver it within budget. That would be great, because obviously if we go over, Anna, you know, you're going to be held accountable for that personally. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Allen.
Right, Councillor Anderson, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the.
Can't hear you very well.
Hang on. Is that better, Anna?
Yeah.
Thank you for the report, Anna. And it's great to hear of you know, the progress you speak of when you introduced it. Obviously, when the site was demolished and you know, there wasn't too much going on, it caused a lot of concern and disappointment in the community, and then we had that, what was it, the pause and reflect exercise, and so it's great to see this progressing. My only question to yourself, Anna, and I suppose also to the chair, is just because of the you know, concern, the disappointment that grew in the community. I think it's important that this continues to come back to committee up until you know, those completion dates arrive. So, you know, it's not something that needs to come every committee, but can we ensure that this continues to come, you know, and we have the opportunity to scrutinise up until that completion date?
Happy for it to come back and welcome the scrutiny of the scheme. And yeah, I think there's a really strong positive message coming out of this project, and we're more than happy to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson, and thank you again, Anna. Councillor Gerrish, do you have any questions?
No, thanks, Chair.
Is there any other members for questions, please? Right, if all members are in agreement with the recommendations outlined within this report, is that, yeah, all recommended? Great, agreed. Right, we'll move on again then. We're to item 8, which is the A13 update report. And can I again ask the officer to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So again, this report's brought to PTR at the request of members. As members know, there are a number of ongoing issues with the project, which have been reported previously in considerable detail. Recent progress on the scheme involves the concrete bridge decks at Orset Cock and Saffron Gardens being poured, and in October marked a milestone as we commenced some resurfacing works. Local spend on the project within a 10-mile radius of the scheme has now exceeded £8 million, supporting local suppliers and local businesses in a time that's more important than ever. We've also employed 6 apprentices and 2 undergraduates on placements on the project. So again, you know, supporting STEM development and the next generation of engineers. The accepted programme for the scheme remains on target for a completion in autumn-winter 2021. The budget is currently being reviewed as the project enters the last 12 months of construction, and we're expecting a revised outturn forecast once further work has been undertaken to be reported to a future meeting. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you for the report, Anna. I think we're all, you know, very concerned about the overspend budget on this A13, and soon as you get any inkling into how much overspend it is going to cost, you'll bring that to us, I'm sure. And also that I would like to say that these costs, these further costs incurred, should not be reflected at all in any type of taxation to our borough residents. Thank you.
That's noted, Chair.
Thank you, Anna. And I open up to questions on the floor. Who's first off? Councillor Kerring, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Anna, for this report. In terms of the budget, the most recent figure, which was for overspend, which was released on the 11th of March of this year, was that it could be 41 million over budget. So are we saying that with the additional costs anticipated and the impacts of COVID, are we saying that we anticipate it now to be more than the 41 million?
Anna.
Thank you, Councillor Kerring. Chair, can I just make a comment about this £41 million, because it's been mentioned at Standards and Audit and it keeps being mentioned quite a few times, but it was that 41 million was a figure that was reported in the press. I'm not sure that it was a figure released by the council, because at the time we published the last revised outturn forecast, the range that we published was between 114 and 120 million, and it was circa a £26.7 million overspend at that time when that revised outturn forecast was published. Obviously, since then we've had COVID. We do have COVID impacts on this project that we are looking at now. So the costs are north of where they are. We don't have the precise detail and figures yet, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to report figures that are not agreed and definite for the reasons that have been well documented on this project. every time it's mentioned in the press or in reports, there's different figures, and we need to be consistent and we need to be accurate in our reporting to make sure that everybody understands the true position on this project.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I agree with you that everything should be consistent in the reporting of it. So a bit like the discussion we had on the Stamford Le Hope item, where we had a cap on the 20 million. Then you're saying it could be over that. With this one, again, with the 41 million, it's based on figures that were actually released to the press by the council. That's where they're getting the information from. So when you say it could be north of this, are you talking north of 41 million?
Councillor Kerrin, I genuinely don't know where the 41 million pounds came from. I don't remember approving a press release that mentioned 41 million pounds. So I really don't know where that figure has come from. I remember the press release where we discussed the range on the outturn forecast. So I can't possibly comment on a figure that I don't know where the background or how it's derived. I can't comment on that. And in relation to Stamford Le Hope, I'd just like to say that I didn't say that the project could be north of 20 million. What I said was that I didn't want to give a definitive view on the figures until we had tested the market. But we are aiming to bring the project in within the 19 point whatever million pounds. So I just want to make that clear, really, if that's okay, because otherwise we're misquoting what we've said.
All right. No, I'm not misquoting. It's just if it can't be capped at 20 million, then there is a possibility that it could go up from that. I don't think I've said anything that's misquoting. What I would say is, in terms of the overspend on the A13, the lack of any figures to date on the report is concerning. I do get that, you're going to keep reviewing it and it could go up, but on this report, there's no actual figure that is currently overspent, like something confirmed in writing. So when we say, oh, things are in the press and everything, well, there was an opportunity to put a figure in this report, which could then be explained as it could be more than this due to ongoing COVID. And I think I personally would have been understanding of that it's overspent by X amount. However, it could go up because COVID isn't resolved yet. It's not. I don't think it's unreasonable to have had a figure on there which then could go up. So if there was to be a figure, say for instance now we redid this report, and with the proviso that it could go up due to COVID, what would be the current overspend to now?
I don't think it's appropriate for me to disclose any figures until the work done to understand all of the reasoning and the justification for that has been done. Obviously, we monitor costs on a monthly basis. We work with our finance team to do that. We have to, because obviously we have to draw down the grant funding as part of the scheme. So we are monitoring the costs on a monthly basis. But what we're doing in this exercise is projecting forward and looking forwards. And there's always, as with the Stamford Le Hope budget, there's always a level of estimating. And it's never certain, is it, until you look back when the project's completed or that phase of the work's completed, and you can close out the costs and account for the money that's been spent. So I can't give you figures at the moment in terms of the future forecast, because the exercise to understand how we arrive at that forecast hasn't yet been completed.
Thank you for that answer, but just respectfully, what I'd say is the project was over budget before COVID hit. So what I'm saying is, if there are doubts about where the press are getting figures from and things like that, that could all be put to bed if we had a figure in this report which says that up until this point, or before COVID hit, this is what we're expecting it to be over budget, or now that COVID is here, there's nothing on this report. There's just three paragraphs or 3 or 4 sentences of just words about what's going to happen, but nothing definitive that we can put our finger on. I think that's the point I was making.
Right.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, thank you. I don't want to badger you anymore, Anna, but following the press release that was issued on the 11th of March, coming out with a figure of 41, I do believe, did you indicate that it was more in excess of just 26? Can you clarify that?
In one of our earlier reports, Chair, and I think it was the report to Standards and Audit Committee in July, we gave the breakdown of the costs. And again, I haven't got another screen in front of me, so I can quote the figures precisely. But in that report, we gave the revised outturn forecast range of being between 114 and 120 million. We gave a breakdown of the costs, and we indicated that the anticipated overspend, it's not an overspend at this point in time because it's a forecast, but the forecast overspend was 26-point-something million. I genuinely don't know where the £41 million figures come from.
Right, thank you, Anna. So again, you indicated the cost was in between 114 and 120 million. So with the overspend of 26, so would that take it to the maximum, if my mathematics is good enough, of 146 million in total? Is that correct? Thereabouts?
No, not on the figures that we've reported previously. No, it's not. I'm trying to find the report. Bear with me. Let me find the report, and then we can have the conversation. Where's the figure?
Just trying to make it clear to people who are
No, I understand. So
listening in.
In the July PTR report, we had a table that gave a cost summary, and it gave the total anticipated outturn costs as 114,675,000. And that figure had been arrived at from construction costs, statutory undertakers, preliminary design, contract supervision, detailed design, land purchase, technical support, and a risk allowance. Then we undertook an exercise in terms of the original approved project budget had been agreed at 78.8 million in 2016. We talked about the value for money exercise that we'd undertaken to secure the extra £8.9 million worth of funding from CELEP. And where we got to, with the allocated 8.9 million, the remaining difference on the forecast was 26.9 million. So that's the figures.
So the anticipated overall cost would be £26.9 million on top of the 114,675,000. Is that correct?
No, it was included within the 114 revised outturn forecast.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that. Thank you. Andy, I think you've had your hand up for quite a while. Would you like to come in on this, Andy?
Thank you, Chair. The points have largely been covered. Thank you through Anna's explanation of the latest reported figures. I was just going to emphasise, in support of what Anna was saying to Councillor Kerrin earlier on, what we say in paragraphs 3.8 to 3.10, that whilst I understand members' desire to know an up-to-date position, because these things will always fluctuate through the life of a significant project. It remains work in progress, with a commitment to come back to this committee once there is clarity on a revised figure, and that's the salient point for this evening's meeting.
Thank you, Andy. Again, looking at these figures of the 114 million, going on from the original 78 point something million in 2016. So that would be an estimated. It would have gone over by 36 in excess of 36 million overspend from the 2016 figures of 78.
Yeah, I mean, I have. If that's 114.9 million less 26.9 less 8.9, then if that's the difference, then yeah.
So we could be looking at a total overspend of in excess of 36 million.
That's based on the figures that we published in July.
Okay. Right, have we got any more questions? Councillor Gerrish?
No, thanks, Chair.
Any other questions, Councillor Potter? No? Okay, we've exhausted the questions by the look of it. Are all members in agreement of the recommendations outlined within the report? Do we agree? I take it we're agreed on that. Moving on to item 9. Now, item 9 is Gray's Town Investment Plan. And again, can I ask the officers to introduce the report, please?
Chair, thank you. I'll give a quick overview which will cover both this report and the following report, which is similarly covering the Tilbury Town Investment Plan. I'll then, in terms of this Gray's one, hand over to David, who will give some more detail as to the sort of processes involved in terms of the town investment plans. And then Justin Thomas, who is the chair of the Grays Town Board, will provide some more detail in relation to the emerging schemes for Grays. Once we've gone through the Grays item, Chair, there'll be a similar presentation from Peter Ward, who is the chair of the Tilbury Town Fund Board. It won't need the introduction on that one from David and myself, because our introductions will cover both of the reports. So just briefly, in November 2019, the government published its prospectus for the Towns Fund, a 3.6 billion fund to provide investment in 101 towns up and down the UK to drive economic regeneration in those areas. The aim is to deliver long-term economic and productive growth through urban regeneration, planning and land use, skills and enterprise, and transport and digital connectivity. Towns are obliged to develop and submit a town investment plan in order to apply for the funding. And as members will no doubt be aware, Thurrock has been fortunate enough to have 2 towns, to say Grays and Tilbury, who have benefited or stand to benefit from this particular funding opportunity. So that's the broad context. As I say, I'll pass to David now, who will provide a little bit more detail around some of the processes before getting into the detail of the projects themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and over to David, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I hope you can hear me okay.
Loud and clear.
Excellent, good, thank you. So as Andy said, I mean, this is a really nice opportunity for the council. It's picking up on the points that Andy's made. There's some government funding that's available for 101 towns across the country, and the process is it's prescribed by the government in the bid pack. And so to try to bid for the funding, what we have to do is to set up a town board, which is led by the business sector and with representation from a number of different local stakeholders. So, for example, we have the MP on the board, the portfolio holder is represented, local ward councillor is represented on the boards, and we also have representatives from business sectors and from communities as well. So the board is set up. As Andy's explained, for Grays, the chair is Justin Thomas, who's the director of New River REIT, who are the owners of Grays Shopping Centre. And for Tilbury, it's Peter Ward, who's the director of the Port of Tilbury. Now, both town boards were awarded a grant by the government to actually help set this up. So the figures are outlined in the papers. It's just over 160,000 for Grays to set up the town board and to help develop the town investment plan. Consultation is one of the key issues here, and the bid is supposed to be developed with a broad consultation with the community. And of course, we do build on the back of a number of consultations that have taken place in the recent past as well. You may be aware in earlier on this year, in February and March, there were 2 consultations in Grays, for example. One was led by the council, and one actually was led by New River Reach in terms of asking local residents the views on how the shopping centre could be redeveloped. But we've taken the consultation further, and we do have both a board and an advisory group, which is a much wider engagement process, and the details of the people who are in the board and in the advisory group are mentioned in the appendix to each of the 2 reports. They're on the back page of the individual reports. So the process we have to go through is to pull together a tip to demonstrate the stakeholder engagement, and then this plan is pulled together. It's supposed to be 95%, around 90% capital, and 5 to 10% revenue is actually the figures changed. And the principles behind the tip are that it should focus on sustainable economic growth, provide an analysis of the area, it can focus on clean growth, and it should align with other funding. In Grays, that's particularly relevant because you'll be aware that we have received other funding for the Grays underpass from local growth fund through the LEP, and we have also been bidding for future High Street fund funding for the areas north of the station. And we're still waiting to hear the progress of that source of that bid for funding. So what we're actually doing in Grays is building on those 2 other funding bids, and there's a particular focus on the area south of the station, as you'll hear shortly. In both Grays and Tilbury, we've also received from the government what's called accelerated funds, and this is mentioned in the papers in paragraph 2.6 in the Grays paper, and in paragraph 2.6 in the Tilbury paper as well. So it gives you an idea that for Tilbury, we received £500,000 worth of funding for this, and £750,000 in Grays. And the idea behind this pot of money is that it's to be spent by the 31st of March 2021. So it's accelerated funding. It has to be spent on projects that are linked with the bigger TIP proposals, the projects that are being developed for the bigger plan. That's the intention. And so we are currently working on trying to deliver those projects. And to give you a rough feel for Grays, we're talking about improvements to Grays bus terminus, and that's roughly about 190,000. There are a series of improvements to Grays Beach, and there's some green infrastructure that's being developed, and some wayfinding. And in Tilbury, there's improvements for a youth centre, there's fitness trails, outdoor gyms, looking to part fund the demolition of the old fire station in Civic Square, and there's also support for shop front schemes that link in with other forms of funding through CLLD. So those are the sort of projects that's where we're up to with the accelerated funding. But as you'll see in the papers, there's been an awful lot of stakeholder engagement that's taken on. And the boards have also been developing the projects, and there's been a number of priorities identified for the 2 tips in Grays and in Tilbury. And in Grays, as I've mentioned, it's really looking at the area south of the station, of the crossing, and going down towards the riverfront, because in Grays there is other funding that's looking at the future High Street and the underpass. So those are the broad areas. It's part of a bigger picture. And in Tilbury, as you'll hear shortly, there's been a focus on the sort of what's called a strategic arc going out from the station in Tilbury towards Civic Square, and then down towards the heritage elements towards the port. So the focus there is on the hub at Station Gateway, the heart, which is the Civic Square in Tilbury, and down towards the heritage elements, which are down towards the forts and the ports. That's roughly by way of introduction. I'm happy to take questions at the end of this. I should say perhaps also that we are due to submit bids we're in cohort 3 in both Grays and Tilbury, and the bids have to be submitted to the government by the 29th of January 2021. So that's the sort of timescale we're up against now. We're starting to work up these bids. There's the whole process. There's huge documents being prepared to pull together to support these bids with lots of supporting information. But what we wanted to do tonight was to ask the chairs of the boards to present some of the latest project ideas to you. So at that point, I'm happy to take questions later, but perhaps through you, Chair, I can suggest that I ask Justin Thomas to take us through the first set of slides, which are to do with Grays. And I'm going to try and share my screen as well, which is could be a bit of a technological challenge, but I'll try and put the slides up. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David, for your report. I think it was quite extensive, but you just missed out one thing, which I noticed, which was the Riverside Jetty that will be added to Grays, I do believe.
Sorry, Chair. I wasn't commenting on the projects. That's what I'm hoping that we'll get through Justin and through Peter. But I was talking about the accelerated funds. That's the schemes that I went through. So I'm just hoping I can get this up now, and I'm not sure that I can. I'm just struggling. PowerPoint. Let me see if I can get in through PowerPoint.
Right, thank you, David. I know you want to hand over to Justin Thomas, which I believe is the new owner for Grays Town Centre. I'm going to be very cheeky and ask Justin a direct question, and it's why was the free-hour parking withdrawn as we approach the festive season? We should be, trying to get people into the town centre. And taking away the free parking, I think, was a bit of a no-no. I don't know if you'd like to answer that first before we. I know I'm cheeky, but answer that before you go on to your presentation.
Yeah. Good evening, Chair. Thank you for having me on. Happy to answer the question, and any others, in fact. David, if you're having trouble sharing that PDF, I can probably share it.
I am, yes, please, Justin. Yeah, there's a number of people. I think Rebecca can also give it a try if I can't. I've got it loaded up on my screen, but can't get it on the image.
Is that visible?
Yes, thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Chair, thank you for your question. I'm the Director of Development at New River REIT, and obviously representative here this evening of New River. In terms of the parking, there's an oversupply of parking in the car park as it is anyway. There's far more car parking spaces there than are required. What we're trying to achieve is to actually work out who are using these spaces and what the demand is for it. It is it's an exercise in many ways to see just how important that car park is, and perhaps it would be helpful if I could come back to this committee, perhaps through David or through Andy, with perhaps a better explanation of what the intention of this exercise is and why it should be carried out at this point in time. I'm sure the centre managers and asset managers will be happy to provide a response to you on that, if you like, in more detail, and perhaps some kind of detail on what it's demonstrating during this short period that it's actually been activated. Would that be helpful?
I guess so, Justin. It's just that as we approach the festive season, you would have thought that we'd try to promote people coming into the town centre and using the shops and acquiring their, their Christmas presents, etc. I just can't understand why, whilst it was taken away, approaching, this very important period. And also understand that there's been quite a few residents that have received fines since then. There's been quite a lot of fines issued, I do believe, as well.
Okay, well, I can't answer that, I'm afraid, Chair. I can't respond to that. As I say, I'm not engaged in the day-to-day asset management or centre management. I can offer, however, to provide a response through the through David or Andy, if that would be helpful.
Is there no way that you could introduce the free parking again just over the Christmas period, Justin?
I hear your question.
Right, if you'd like to continue, please, then, Justin.
Okay. Okay, so this is the presentation for the. It's just disappeared off the screen again. Is it visible? Is it visible?
I think I might be able to get it back up. I'm hoping this works.
Okay. Fine. So this is the slide which is starting to provide some of the detail on the selection of preferred sites that David was just alluding to, that the Towns Fund Board is promoting through the Town Investment Plan. This slide shows those sites which the Towns Fund Board are bringing forward set against the other funded initiatives, such as the Future High Street Fund and the Local Growth Fund. So the red outline there, the Future High Street Fund proposals are focused largely on the centre of the High Street area in the town centre to the north of the railway station. And you've also then got that circular underpass zone, which is funded by local government funding. There's 10.8 million pounds worth of local government fund, local growth fund, coming into that zone. So it's important when we were looking at the £25 million budget allocated from the Towns Fund that we took into account what is already being provided there and ensured that the Towns Fund fits around that and complements it. And so the sites as shown here, as listed on the our Towns Fund projects, is number 1 down at the bottom, the Future Grays Riverside. Number 2 is the Riverfront connectivity. Number 3 is the Sustainable Transport interchange to the north of the railway station. Number 4 is the Grays North connectivity up on Orsett Road. And then number 5 is the Grays pier or jetty, shown there as an indicative location, which we're currently working through. It's important just to touch upon the purpose behind the selection of these sites, which was deliberately to reconnect town centre and Riverside, to enhance the Riverside destination in order to draw residents and visitors to the Riverside and to the town of Grays more generally. The heritage of Grays with its Riverside is the golden thread that runs through this Towns Fund proposal, which is an extremely important part of the proposal. MHCLG want to see that there is a theme, a rationale, a reason behind it, a golden thread, and hopefully that will become more apparent as I refer to these sites individually. If you can go on to the next slide, please. Starting with the Grays Beach Park and Riverfront. Grays Beach is a very well established and very popular leisure destination, particularly with families. It's a well established community cafe. It also has the capacity to anchor the Riverside destination, but it needs better linkage both to the Riverside itself and back into the town centre. It's a very important piece of that whole destination theme, and what we're looking at here in the Beach Park and Riverfront really is how that combination of Grays Beach links in to the space immediately to the northwest there, which is the Thames Road car park and the Kilverts Field. That zone there, together with the extended river frontage, is a very very relevant piece, very important piece of and is the almost the top priority. Is no coincidence that it's the first project listed in this sheet here, because it is the foundation of the draw to the riverside, to enhance that draw, to bring the town and the river closer together and give them a joined up purpose. So if we go on to the next slide, this is the next relevant piece, which is the linkage between the riverfront and the town centre. This slide here shows a view looking east along Argent Street at the bottom of the High Street in front of Greystown Wharf. It's not necessarily exactly what's being proposed, but it does illustrate that the linkage, the pedestrian route between that riverside frontage, here the wharf, but also just linking through the other side of the buildings over to Kilvert's Field, coming back up through the college, up to the station and the High Street, is a very, very important piece. The proposals are intending to ensure that this is a well-signed, safe and attractive route that's perceived to be an extension to a vibrant high street. And signage, linkage up to the station is going to be part of the proposals as well. So that's the second item in the TIP proposals. If you can go on to the third one, the next slide, please. We're showing here the bus station and improving the bus terminus, but we're talking about sustainable transport interchange. We're talking about the gateway arrival into the town centre, the station, how it links with the bus route. What we're trying to establish here is a scheme, a proposal that delivers on two fronts. It encourages greater use of the sustainable transport strategies, and it makes their journey in and out of Grays as pleasant as possible, generating more visitors, more activity, again, more growth. It's a very important piece of that town centre, and this is a key focus for us in terms of how that funding is deployed. Onto the next one, please. This slide is this actually shows the Orsett Road area looking towards the Thameside Theatre. The intention is to improve this northern gateway into the heart of the town centre, contributing towards a sense of place for a cultural zone in front of the Thameside Theatre, improvements to the public realm, and digital connectivity such as free Wi-Fi and creative street lighting to enhance this zone. And you can see that this we've skipped to the north here of the High Street, again at the centre of the High Street, reflecting that most of the future High Street Fund proposals were targeting the High Street central area. So this is effectively touching upon the High Street, but that northern zone from the Memorial through to the Thameside Theatre. Next slide, please. This is the reference to the jetty and the river bus service. At the moment, we don't have a picture of a jetty because we don't have a location for the jetty yet. We're fortunate that we've been taking some of the history of this investigation from Tilbury, who are a little bit ahead in looking at a jetty for their own purposes, and we're using the same consultant, Beckett Rankin, to look at the optimum location for a jetty. And then we're looking at actually what that size should be, and that'll help us define what the cost and design of that jetty should be. We've had regular dialogue with Thames Clipper Services, who are working up a new route from Tilbury and Gravesend into central London, which would also support a commuter service from Grays as well, because that would be a stopping point on that route, as well as Purfleet, in fact. And it would also help to establish Grays as a destination for visitors coming east along the river out to Grays. The benefit we're getting here in terms of the proposals that are ahead of us at Tilbury are largely because Tilbury forms part of the transport network to support the London Resort, the forthcoming London Resort at Swanscombe, and whilst Grays is not part of that strategy, that highway strategy, we have been in discussions with London Resort, and we would like to provide a crossing point using our jetty so that we can get become a jumping off point, another jumping off point where people can come out of London or come through on the train to Grays and then walk down on our enhanced route down to the river to be able to use that jetty and get over to Swanscombe, and then again increasing footfall, increasing visitor traffic, through Grays and improving the general turnover in Grays. So those proposals are ongoing at the moment, and we've mentioned to London Resorts that whilst we know we're outside their strategic plan, we are open to contributions and support. Likewise, working with Thames Clipper Services, they will provide the vessels, the staff, the routes, but they look to the towns themselves to provide the jetty facilities. So again, if we provide it, they will add it to their service. And so again, we're working up the proposals with them as closely as possible. So that brings me to the end. That's the final piece of the tip for Grays, and hopefully that conveys the ambition of the town investment plan.
Thank you for the report, Justin. Before we open up to members for questions, I've got another question for you. Are you looking to transform the current Grays Town Centre into a housing venture, introducing accommodation in the near foreseeable future?
We at New River are talking to the council. We're currently looking at the opportunities, and we're working with the design team, the officers, the urban design officers, the highways officers, to look at what would be the most appropriate scheme. We do believe that the town centre would support and would benefit from a residential-led redevelopment. The shopping centres across the UK at the moment are often oversized, and Grays is no exception. It is 170,000 square foot of retail space, and it is struggling to keep it let, and it is oversized for its purpose. It also the town centre would also benefit from a redesign that opened that centre up more, created more public open space in the heart of the town. So our proposals are residential led with significant public open space and community benefit as well as an element of retail in there as well, because we're not saying that retail is obsolete, is no longer required. We need the right volume of retail in the right locations.
And following on from that, Justin, how many residential units are you actually proposing?
Well, we're not so much looking at the number of residential units at the moment, such as the scale and massing of the buildings. And we believe that there has capacity for some tall buildings in that location. I wouldn't want to define at this stage what that might be, but I would suggest that there is several hundred new homes that could be added to that location, which I think would be extremely helpful to the housing supply requirements for the borough.
I'm sure across the political balance within council, I'm sure all councillors will have some kind of a concern of introducing more residential properties into an already built up area, an already probably congested area. I mean, in close proximity with London Road being one of the busiest roads, and at the moment it's having all kinds of gas works done on it and stuff. Introducing further residential properties into an already congested area. And I will open up now to members. Who's first, Wendy? Councillor Kerrin, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got 2 points which are kind of related, so I'll ask them both at the same time. Firstly, can I just say I welcome all the very positive aspects of this report, like I think especially in terms of the upgrade of the Riverfront and everything like that. In terms of that, on 2.6 and 3.9, there's a lot of focus on Grays Beach, Hilbert Field, and all that, and I think that is a gem which should be could become fantastic. But I'm worried about how people are going to get there, because the Grays Beach car park, the Argent Street car parks are all part of the infamous housing list. So what we'd be doing is taking away car parking from an area that we actually want to build up as a tourist spot. And I know there'll be a lot of talk about, buses and things like that, but ultimately, if people want to get in the car and drive down to spend time at Kilvert's Field, and I'm speaking very personally about this. It's in my ward, and I know it's an area that has massive potential. Does it make sense to be taking away parking spaces when we need people to come and visit and to park there? And I'm going to ask this follow-up straight away, because I think you might be able to answer two in one. It's kind of following on from what the chair was talking about in terms of the housing for the that Justin alluded to as well. With that, plus the housing that could potentially be earmarked for the car parks, how many residential units are we looking at in total?
Is that for me to answer? I'm happy to have an initial response to that, David.
I was certainly the parking question. Through the chair, I'd suggest it's probably one for me. So I'm happy. Shall I take that first, and then
can you see why I asked both together rather than?
I can. So through you, chair, if that's all right, I'll pick this up. I mean
yeah, that's fine, David.
Thank you. So the parking questions. I mean, the list that you're talking about is the housing development options list, and there's been a lot of discussion about this, but it is, as it says at the moment, it is a series of options list, and at the moment we're investigating those sites, and there's not a decision being made to turn them into housing development, and clearly both the housing teams and housing development team and the Regen team both report into me and ultimately into Andy. So there's an awful lot of work that is going on behind the scenes to try and coordinate and cross-fertilise between the different demands. And clearly, you make a good point, Councillor. That there will be demand, and we haven't got a scheme yet. But we are having to look at, is it possible to improve the parking so people can come in and visit, and to put housing on top? And at the moment, we don't know. We haven't got that far in the thinking. But clearly, as the Grays Towns Fund bid is developing, then this is starting to change, and will need to be reflected in the proposal for housing development. So again, I'm just being straightforward here. We don't have the answer for this, but it's all I can tell you is that there is not for definite a housing scheme. It is on a housing development options list. That's absolutely correct. But as I said before, all we're doing is investigating those sites. We're letting people know up front that we're investigating those sites, and clearly we're reflecting what's happening in the Towns Fund as well. That's new to that scheme.
Thanks, David. I'll just follow on that, and then perhaps we could talk about the residential units afterwards. I was very conscious of using the word list because I knew the reply would be it's only a list, because I remember previous discussions about it. I do get that. However, it doesn't seem to make any sense to me to be having these fantastic ambitions for the riverfront whilst also not factoring in how people are going to get there, and the incentive for people to have nice, easy parking to be able to experience Grays Beach and the riverfront and everything. So I don't mean it's disrespectfully, but it doesn't seem very joined up. It's almost like the list as such is running sort of separate to all the ambitions for the riverfront. And what needs to happen, in my view, is we need to decide how important is building up the riverfront. And I think it's a really exciting proposal. And that's why the rest, I wanted to put on record how excited I am about the proposals. But there needs to be joined up thinking that if we're going to have this great riverfront and encourage people to come out of the area and people to spend their money in Grays, which will benefit the residents of Grays in the long run, it just doesn't make any sense to me to take away all the parking, which will enable tourists to come and visit.
Yeah, sure. I understand that, and that it's what I should explain perhaps is the timing issue on this, because what we're doing is we're putting in a the housing development options were brought to council earlier on January, February this year. Since then, we've been developing the Grays Towns Fund. That will then go in as part of the improvement plan. We then need to work up the business cases for the schemes that are developed, and then that goes into a town deal development proposal with the government. And then gradually we start to get the funding for that. So there's a timescale involved here that means that we haven't agreed. The council hasn't agreed that there is definitely going to be car parking on these sites. This is part of the work that we're doing to try and look at the demand of car park space that will be needed for the development. And again, it's a proposal that's going forward rather than definite. And it's just, these things are all being considered in the round. I take your point. I understand the point you're making about the need for attractions and parking for people that bring in it, and that is being taken into account. We just haven't got to that decision yet. So it's a helpful discussion, Councillor. We understand the issue, and that it's being taken into the mix. And you asked about housing numbers. Again, my answer really is that we haven't quite. Sorry, Councillor, you're muted, but we haven't got those numbers finalised yet either, but by the same token.
Because thank you for that. Because obviously with lack of parking, you're not going to get people there, and it's something I've been. I think I've spoken to you about it before in the past. I've been speaking to housing portfolio holder. Because I want this to work, because ultimately it's a fantastic idea. And in terms of the numbers of potential residential units, if we say, if it was the Grays Beach car park, the Argent Street car park, the Darnley Road car park, the civic offices, and the amount of units that Justin alluded to earlier, there must be an estimate of how many units and what this would do to the population size and the traffic size of Grays. So I understand there'd be no firm commitments yet, because unit numbers can change based on all sorts of issues, but there must be a rough number of how many units you're expecting to put in. And if these car parks are taken away and given to housing, what's that going to do for the parking of people who could eventually live in these units? I know it's only a list and it's an upfront thing. I do understand all that, but there must be some kind of at least rough estimate of where we're heading with it.
Yeah, I haven't got the figures to hand. I'm happy to sort of come back, but I mean, I'd comment as well that part of what we're trying to do, I mean, Justin mentioned the jetty, and a lot of what we're trying to do through the town investment plan is to focus on sustainable transport schemes. You heard comments about the bus station and the bus terminus, the river jetty, and the pier is looking to try and take some of the strain as well. So part of we are trying to encourage people to move away from cars and into sustainable transport as well. So that's part of the scheme, and certainly some of the aspirations are that the river bus would not just go across the river, but may also go up and down into the city. So that takes away some of the transport. We're hoping that we can talk about a rail and sail journey over to the London resort. So that again is encouraging people to use the rail rather than cars. But so that's the sort of situation. I'm conscious Andy's got his hand up as well. I don't know if it was on this specific point, but I don't know if you wanted to comment about this specifically, Andy.
I just wanted to see this in context and to ask the committee if we can really focus on the elements that are in the town board's presentation this evening. That's not to suggest for one moment that the wider conversation about greys and what might happen to areas of public estate, whether it be car parks or CO1, whether it be big slugs of private estate, such as the New River Shopping Centre, aren't all very material, as are some significant areas of town centre fringe land, including places like the Titan Works. All of that holistically needs to be put together to ensure that Grays thrives going forward. The local plan has a key point to play in that, in terms of collating all of that as well. But here, fundamentally, this evening, this is about the emerging suite of projects which will be able to come forward through the town fund. I draw members in particular to paragraph 3.8 of the report, and the three driving areas of focus that the board have rightfully looked at in terms of bringing these projects forward. Schemes that complement those that are already underway, reflect issues that have been brought about by public engagement, and require capital funding, recognising that's the main form of the town fund that's available to us. So in other words, town fund won't be able to do everything, but it must do things that are complementary to what is already going on in Grays, and also what might come forward in the future. And it's those projects and proposals that Justin's presented this evening, which would be really useful to get the committee's views on. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, David, and Councillor Kerrin. I'll just remind Councillor Kerrin and the other members that where we sit today, myself, Councillor Potter and Wendy, this will become demolished eventually, and this will be a housing project where we're actually sitting today in the area we're sitting today. So we have to take that into consideration as well, which I think is a further 80 units, I think, thereabouts. But yes, definitely take your point on driving into the town, Councillor Kerrin, and it's evident that, you know, they want to push people onto public transport, but you know, it's not great, our public transport. You know, it's not frequent enough that you can jump on and jump off, and there's also the costs incurred as well. Perhaps if the public travel was a little bit cheaper, it might, you know, promote people to use it. Okay, then we'll move on. Is there any further questions? Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report and presentation, David and Justin. Looking at both the Greytown investment plan and the Tilbury investment plan, in the report for Tilbury, there's actually quite a large section on heritage that talks about you know, promoting the heritage of Tilbury, and I think this is something that's really important. I didn't really see, apologies if this is an oversight on my part, but I didn't really see much on heritage in the Grays report. I was just wondering if you could let me know how you think you know, this investment and plan will help us to conserve and enhance Grays' heritage.
So through you, Chair, if I may, I apologies, because we've not actually moved on to the Tilbury part of the presentation either yet, and that's obviously the bit that will come up next. So and the focus on heritage. I mean, really, what we're trying to do is to try and encourage people to come into the river. I mean, that one of the big points of this is to, you know, we have a river that is, you know, if you come into the town, then you hardly notice the river is there. So we're trying to encourage people down to the river from the train station. And I'll take you back to the comments we made at the start. This is not a scheme in isolation. There are schemes that are going on about through the Future High Street Fund to try and improve the area immediately north of the railway line. And also the level crossing, the local growth fund, money is being used to try and develop a programme to put in place an underpass to take away one of the most difficult level crossings in the area. What we're not specifically doing, I mean, the Tilbury bid is set up so it's focused on the heart, the hub, and the heritage element. Doesn't have to be the case in all of the town fund bids. So each board is able to set up its own focus and its own area. And so I'm sorry, Justin, I'm speaking for you on this really, but the boards had a focus on it's a geographic focus more. But the heritage bit, I would argue and suggest, is probably the focus on the river, which this town fund bid is helping us to really improve the links down to the river. So you've got the Riverside Beach Park, you've got the jetty that will be put in place, and the ferry that improves the transport links across there. So maybe not quite an immediate focus on heritage, but that I think is where that's the real focus of the town fund. But perhaps I should ask Justin to comment.
Thank you. No, thank you, David, and through the chair, if I may, Councillor Anderson, thanks for your question. The reference to heritage in the presentation that I made was relating specifically to that connectivity between river and town. And some of the historical reviews that we've done clearly showed that actually the town was divided in two when the railway came through. And actually the growth then to the town was to the north of the railway line. And actually it divided the working wharf side, if you like, with actually where the residents were, and actually it seemed to split the town in two. And I think the underpass, while not being part of the town fund and the town investment plan, is a significant part of that heritage reconnection. And actually the jetty reinforces the use of the actual commerciality use of that wharf side, because actually the wharf is sitting there empty and full of silt at the moment, but actually whilst the wharf is very unlikely to be part of the ferry or the jetty piece because of the silting and the cost of silting, actually reintroducing a ferry use on that corner is revitalising that historical use of what was once a very active wharf.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Wouldn't it be wouldn't it be a great idea if we could introduce even a marina of some sort to Grays to incorporate the Clipper service as well? But I should imagine the cost would be rather expensive. Right, are we finished on all questions on this? Because I'd like to move on to item 10. Are we finished on questions, or Andy?
Chair, what I was going to suggest is, because there are two separate items, that members firstly move to the vote on the Grays item, and there are set out on page 46 three recommendations. As David said in introduction, we'd like to introduce a fourth, and that is that the committee, upon considering the application this evening, gives its support to the work that's going on under the work of Justin and the town board, and that can then go in as a bit of supporting evidence for the town investment plan when it's submitted in January. But I think you need to take a vote on this one first, Chair, before we move on to the Tilbury item.
Yeah, of course, Andy. I mean, are all members in agreement with the recommendations outlined in this report?
Agreed.
Right, we're agreed on that then. So we can ideally move on to item 10, which is the Tilbury investment plan. And can I ask officers to introduce the report, please?
Chair, as I said in introducing the Grays item, the broad introductions from David and I essentially cover both of the town investment plans. So what I will do is I'll pass you over to Peter Ward, who's chair of the Tilbury Town Fund Board, and he can present the proposals that are coming forward from him and his team.
Thank you. Over to Peter Ward, please.
Thanks, Chair, and good evening, everybody. I know quite a few people on the call already, but for those that don't know me, I'm Peter Ward. I'm the Commercial Director for the Port of Tilbury. I've been working in Tilbury for this is my 38th year working in Tilbury, working for the port, both as customer and as an employee of the port now for some 23 years. Been in Tilbury for quite some time. So as chair of the board and representing the board tonight, just like to start off really with a couple of points around the town itself and what the board is looking to try and do with the potential fund that's coming our way from government. And I think we started with a very strong view that we want to put some pride back into the town. We felt that Tilbury has been unloved a bit for some time, and that it needs a little bit of TLC, to say the least. And there is a really strong underlying community spirit in Tilbury, and I've certainly experienced that during my time in Tilbury and doing a lot of local consultation, particularly in the last few years for our port development, Tilbury 2. So we've had lots of engagement. I personally have had lots of engagement with the local community. And at the heart of these funds is to make sure that we've done a lot of local consultation. And just personally speaking, I've spoken to all of the ward councillors in Tilbury individually and walked them all the way through these projects, including the chair tonight. And, you know, it's fair to say that from all the local ward councillors, we've had some very strong support for the projects that I'm going to talk you through. We've also been doing a lot of local consultation now for about 2 months. We launched our website for the Tilbury Town Fund, which you can access and where people can leave comments and suggestions for the town's fund. So we've done an awful lot of consultation. The results of that consultation are telling us that the projects that we're putting forward are, you know, in the 80-90% supported. So there's a very high level of engagement and support for what we're wanting to put forward as a board. And as was touched on earlier by David, there's also sitting below the board an advisory group that are also on board with these projects, and we've used them very much from a consultation process. Justin touched on earlier sort of about a golden thread running through these projects. These town funds do have to have the link. Our link is very much hub, heart and heritage. And that's very much around putting an arc through the town that almost starts at the railway station, develops into the civic square in the centre of the town. You see that on the drawing there, and takes us down to the river. And we are very much connecting, similar to Grays, Tilbury back to the river, but we're also connecting Tilbury with its history. It has a massive, rich history, which, you know, I'm sure a number of you are aware of. It was the place where Elizabeth I made her famous speech against the Spanish Armada. It's also where the Windrush generation came to the UK as well. So there's a very rich history, as well as the fact that we've had a port there for 133 years. And it's the only existing part of what was the original London dock structure. So massive amount of maritime history, very much supporting us as a trading nation. And we felt we needed to capture that within our town's plan. And therefore, you know, we started with the concept of when you first arrive in the town. So I don't know if we can just move to the next slide, David. I don't know if you're running the slides there. So our first thinking on Tilbury was, when you arrive in Tilbury, you know, what are you presented with? And I think when you get off the train in Tilbury at the moment, you're not arriving in the most inviting place. And we felt that this was an area that we really wanted to focus on. And this is really the hub of the town, because this is where people arrive. Certainly from arriving on the train, or they're arriving in on buses, or whether they're arriving in by car into the town. This is very much the hub. And this is where the starting point for the first part of our Towns Fund project is to redevelop this particular area. That includes improving the public spaces, putting in digital connectivity, and in all the three areas that you'll see in our projects, we're talking about improving digital connectivity. I think it's never been more important in the current situation that we're in. We've all had to learn to use digital technology a lot more, as we're using this evening. And it's a really important point on the town's fund that we put in a level of connectivity here, whether that's in just increasing the Wi-Fi in certain locations or putting in more fibre. There's certainly one of our projects is to improve digital connectivity, but it does go hand in hand with the projects that we're looking at. So this is a view that you can see on the town side. So we'd be very much opening this area up into a plaza. It won't restrict the traffic flow, but it puts all of the ground on an even level. We'd be improving all of the shop fronts in that area. There's a lot of redundant shop fronts and a lot of fairly redundant buildings. So opening the whole area up into a better public space. And then when you get to the other side of the railway station, if you're coming up on the port side, what you currently see at the moment is very much just a grey wall across the road from you. So this is where we would be looking to just recreate the link to the maritime history. And you can see a concept drawing there of the sort of things that we're looking at. And across the road, enhancing the dock wall. There's lots of ideas about what we can do for that, including some sort of revolving screen where local school children can do pictures and we can project them onto the side of the dock wall. So we make it a much more welcoming, open space, and we're completely regenerating that area. So that's the first part of the hub and the first part of the public space. So just moving then from the station towards the centre of the town and just following that arc through, we come to a site on Calcutta Road. This is just an area of grass at the moment, but what we're looking to do is to turn that into a public space, a really nice, vibrant, open public space. And I think if we go to the next slide, we can see a concept drawing again of what that will look like. So a nice planted area, places where people can go and sit. Again, putting some digital connectivity into that area for young people particularly, and looking again, there's a sort of sculpture there which sort of again links the sort of maritime history of Tilbury. So again, regenerating a very redundant area, and we're calling that sort of area Calcutta Park at the moment. So moving further into the town, if you can go to the next slide, we come to really what we're calling the heart. The Civic Square is effectively the heart of Tilbury. And this is where the main focus of our projects are, moving up from the station gateway. And you can see a number of buildings highlighted there, which you can see the cursor going over. So the one to the right as you're looking, which is sitting in the middle of the anchor fields there, is probably, I would call it the jewel in the crown of our projects, which is a new community centre. Youth facility. So I'll come back to community centre. So this is a new youth facility. We would be bringing in an outside provider to operate that, called Onside. Onside operate youth facilities up and down the country. A number of those are in inner city areas, and they're well known for creating fantastic facilities for young people. And this would take people from the age of 8 up to the age of 18. But it would provide a massively broad range of activities for young people, taking them right the way through to future employment opportunities as well. And we would be looking for business in the long term to invest into this facility. And it's fair to say this is the only facility. We've touched on the fact that this is a capital fund, but if I look at all of the capital projects that we're doing, this is the one that will require a level of commitment from the council going forward in the future, and will require some funding from the council. These on-site facilities are to a large degree self-funded, but we would also be looking for local business to invest in that. And I can tell you that the port would be number one in the queue as an investor into this type of facility, because we see this type of facility helping young people, giving them lots of opportunities and almost moving through into employment opportunities. The other thing to touch on is that this facility employs roughly about 20 people, and they're committed to employing local people. So the actual facility itself gives local employment opportunities. It's also match funded by Onside. So this is a facility that's probably around about £9 million, but half of that would be funded by Onside. The other half would be funded by the Towns Fund. And the Towns Fund would probably supply most of the funding for this for the first couple of years. And then we would look at a funding scheme that would range up from there, but with local business getting involved in it. So that's one of our biggest projects. I think it's fair to say it's the one that has the most support from local people. Local people are very keen to see that we make an impact on young people and that we give young people opportunities within the town that don't exist at the moment. If we then move to the centre of the Civic Square, you'll probably all be aware that there's already funding for an integrated medical centre. This is a brand new medical centre for Tilbury. We are going to provide some additional funding to that to take it to what's called a BREEAM standard building. Now, a BREEAM standard building is about the best type of building that you can build from an environmental perspective. It shows on its running costs somewhere around about 40% savings. It incorporates all the latest technology, but it also will enhance it as a sort of community space as well. We're going to move the library into this facility, and there'll be open community areas and spaces for things like cafes, for example. So, you know, everybody's aware of what the Civic Square looks like at the moment. Can you imagine what it will look like with a facility like this? Fortunately, we haven't got some of the images of that on the presentation tonight, but I can tell you there's some really stunning images of what that will look like when it's built. So this is complementing an existing scheme that is already funded. The other areas that we're going to focus on are to refurbish the existing Tilbury Hub and the library. This is to give opportunities for adult education, possibly an arts offering as well. And then you can see what is the existing police station or the old police station there. The view on that is that can be either refurbished or demolished to make way for future housing opportunities. We don't have any housing built into the Tilbury Town Fund. We've decided not to focus on housing very early on. What we want to do is improve the town and improve the facilities and regenerate the town in the areas where we feel it needs to be regenerated. But with the real heart of this is to regenerate it and cater for our future generations growing up in Tilbury. So then if we move a bit across the road to the corner, sorry, can you go back to the previous one, David? Sorry, just like to cover again, another thing that we've picked up both as a board and through consultation is a need for an all-inclusive community space. And again, we feel this would be something that would be focused within the Civic Square, either by regenerating existing community spaces or provide a brand new community space in the centre of the Civic Square behind the existing library. So that would actually transform the entire middle of that square into a total new build area. Other enhancements coming off of this from the Civic Square on the anchor fields would be to be spending some money on the park areas. And we'll come on to the next slide. We're also planning to spend money on some of the open spaces like the Daisy Fields, for example, and you can see a concept there of some of the types of things that we may look to do there. That's still under refinement, it's fair to say at the moment, but certainly again, regeneration of green spaces for local community has featured pretty prominently within the consultation that we've been doing. So that really covers the heart of the Towns Fund. So we can just move on to the next slide. That really takes us down to the riverside at Tilbury. And you can see there a concept drawing of the pontoon for a clipper service. I think you would have picked up earlier some comments around the London Resort. The London Resort is a DCO project, as you're probably all aware, on the other side of the river for a theme park. Our thought process on this is, yes, that's something that may come in the future, but we're more focused on delivering a river bus service into London as a starting point, and that's what this pontoon would deliver. We're working very closely, as we have been with Thames Clipper, to deliver an extension of their existing service further out from East London to bring that down to Tilbury, and then it would service Tilbury and Southend and potentially Grays, as you've heard in Justin's presentation. But very much, just want to be clear, the focus as a starting point has to be to deliver this for taking commuters into London, bringing them back out again, but also a leisure offering so we can actually bring people into Tilbury to experience the heritage that is already there, particularly around Tilbury Fort. And again, we don't yet have the images of what the regeneration of the Riverside will look like, but we are planning to regenerate the Riverside. There's an awful lot of projects going on at the moment that link to this, not least some of the Section 106 work from Tilbury 2, which is already putting in transport links down to the river with cycle pathways and widened pathways. Part of what we'll be doing is building on that and enhancing that. So improving the visitor attraction to Tilbury Fort, opening that up as a Tilbury as a tourist attraction to a much greater extent than it is now, and also looking at the Two Forts Way footpath and bringing enhancements to that from the Tilbury end. And again, this is where the heritage part of our offering comes in. We are linking the town back with the river, but we are also bringing out all of the history that Tilbury is famous for. So we'll be looking at public sculptures down there on the riverside, things that relate to Queen Elizabeth I and to Windrush, as I've discussed, but also some regeneration on the cruise terminal to make it a place where people actually want to come. So putting a cafe in there, improving all of the facilities down by the riverside that make that an actual attractive place for people to come down to, cycle down to, and this all really ticks the box, I think, in terms of sustainable transport. And again, all of these areas that we've touched on, looking about linking them digitally as well, so we've got good connectivity for people that are using those areas. So those are probably the main things that I wanted to talk about. There's a real passion with the board to deliver this for Tilbury. Our fund is probably sitting at somewhere between 25 and 30 million at the moment. We've got to refine the numbers down. We're now putting together the documents that would need to be submitted at the end of January. And I think this is a really exciting opportunity for Tilbury. And I think the fact that it's so well supported by local people, community groups, local councillors, with everybody behind this, we really want to see this succeed. And it is a real game changer for Tilbury. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Peter. If I can start first before we open up to members. Some exciting things about to happen for Tilbury. And as you said, I think in past years, Tilbury has kind of been classed as the forgotten town, really, and it absolutely needs a bit of love. And I think, what you're proposing is the love that it needs, I think. Being born and bred Tilbury myself, worked extensively throughout your dock, probably on most of the berths, to be honest with you. So Tilbury's very close to my heart, and as you know, I'm a ward councillor there, and I've been a ward councillor for over 4 years now. Love the place, love the people, and some great projects there. Obviously, the station looks good. The introduction of new shop fronts, which would be fantastic. Moving on down to the split where Calcutta Road splits with Dock Road, a new proposed Calcutta Park, I think you called it, with a water feature as well, and the maritime links like anchors, ropes, etc. Fantastic. Moving down to the youth facility. Now, since the last time we spoke, that youth facility has slightly changed, because I was under the impression that we were looking at purchasing the former police station and transforming that into the youth facility. But I understand that there was some outside play space that was needed, and they did consider putting the play space on the roof, I do believe, and that didn't work as such. Just slightly taken back by you wanting to acquire more of the anchor field. Now, the anchor field, if you're aware, we have lost some of that. Now, initially, I do believe that field, the anchor field and the Daisy field, which is the King George playing field, better known as the Daisy field, were given over to the people of Tilbury some years back and went into Fields in Trust, I think in the early 1960s, for recreational purposes. Now, we did see the introduction of a sports facility on the anchor field, which became financially unviable. It shut down, it closed down, it became kind of a derelict building. Then it was burnt out, which changed the use of that space, where it was a green space, into a brownfield site. Now, we lost that. We lost that big chunk there to a development, a housing development, which we see on there now. And subsequently, I do believe this was offered to Thurrock Council, because I spoke to the consultant that was dealing with it, and we lost that building. We got offered that building, Thurrock Council, but we lost that building down to £100,000, I do believe. The debate was over £100,000, and we lost that building. And subsequently, now that building is occupied by Newham Council, which kind of outraged the Thurrock residents and Tilbury residents, because we've got our own families that are on the waiting list that would have loved those 40 units there, but we lost them to Newham Council. Now, we're talking about losing more of that field there. Now, you said, Peter, that you've been in consultation with Tilbury residents, and they're delighted to see the oncoming youth facility, which I am, but I'm not so sure on that field, losing more of that field. Now, are you sure that you consulted with residents that was going to be the proposed site? Moving on.
Chair, do you want me to answer that one first?
Yeah, if you would then, Peter, please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think this is it's fair to say that this is a slightly recent change forced on us by the fact that we realised with Onside that the police station is just not a big enough footprint. Ideally, it would have gone on the police station site, because I think we would have sort of killed two birds with one stone, if you like. We would have got rid of a redundant building that's a bit of an eyesore, but it would have enabled us then to put the youth facility there. One of the requirements for Onside, and I suppose this is it's sort of linked with the open space, that they don't just want a facility that doesn't have an open space next to it, because they want to encourage, outside areas where they can do various things with young people, various activities. So they're very much focused on having it located next to an outside area, and it's fair to say that change as something that's really only come about in the last 5 or 6 weeks. So it's fair to say, I suppose, answering your question, it wasn't consulted on from the start, because we didn't really know the true location of where it was going to end up at that point. So that is the area that we're looking at the moment. It's fair to say that we're still looking at all the options, Chair, but it would ideally sit with some outside area where young people can have other activities going on. And I suppose to counter that, one thing I would say is we are intending to spend some money on King George's Daisy Fields, as you call them. So to some degree, I would see that, and what we're trying to do with Calcutta Park, and what we're doing in the Civic Square in opening up public space as a degree of a level of compensation for that, if I can put it that way. So I do take your point, but I think in the overall scheme of things, we're probably offering what I would say is a fair amount of mitigation if it was to be located there.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. When I was going to move on, and then you answered those questions, I was going to move on to the element of the Daisy Field, and absolutely delighted to see that, because that we never spoke about, and that slide that you put on there looks absolutely fantastic. Now, could you touch on exactly what we are about to see delivered on the King George playing field, otherwise known as the Daisy Field? Can you elaborate more of what we could possibly see delivered on that, in that area?
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say we're still, that's probably one part of our projects that we're still refining a bit. So there is still a bit of work to do in that area. What we're looking to do is obviously make that a much better area for local people, an area where people can come and enjoy the area better, to give a bit more of an area where we can entertain some more open sports, but also to give some hard standing areas where we can also provide other facilities like changing rooms and things like that, for example. So there's a bit more work to do to refine that part of the project. That will become, I think, a bit more refined over the next few weeks, because given our timetable, we're pretty much finalising where we are with projects over the next 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll be able to give you better definition, and what I'm keen to do once we've got final refinement on some of these projects, and they won't all be refined completely because they have to go into the bid, we have to get the money, and then we have to sort of build a business plan. So that some of them will change and evolve a little bit as they go through a business plan, which is at a later stage when we get the money. But certainly what I will want to do before we submit our bid at the end of January is again go out to local people, but also out to the local councillors and do what I did before, which is to have a good discussion with all the local councillors about that before it's submitted. So I can't answer all of your question tonight, Chair, but certainly before it goes in, we'll give you some better definition of what we think that area will look like.
Yeah, that'd be great, Peter. Thank you, and I do appreciate that there are some good-looking plans that involve the Daisy Field. You're probably aware of the 633 DS squad, which is called the Daisy Squad, which takes young children over there and exercises them. They play football activities and so on. I mean, it'd be great if we could accommodate those into some kind of, give them some storage for their equipment. Let's say changing rooms, toilet facility, washroom facility, things like that. And also, you're probably aware of the Martial Arts Academy being their home being terminated. I mean, the former fire station. Is there any chance that we can look into relocating that facility? The service that Dean Turner provides for the community.
Yes, we are in discussions, Chair, with Dean. Lucy, who's also on the board, is having an open dialogue on how we can facilitate that going forward. So the other bit I'd just draw some attention to is we are looking at an enhanced community space, but we want an all-inclusive community space where which is accessible for everybody, and that certainly can form part of that. And there's a fairly large element of spend that we're looking at in terms of community space as well. So yes is the answer to your question. There's lots of dialogue going on with various groups that are probably going to become a little bit unsettled by some of the process, but we want to make sure that we incorporate as many of those things as we can. And the real focus, picking up your point again on the daisy fields, the real focus of this, and I want it to come across, and I hope it does, is we really want to focus on young people, and we want to focus on young people now, but for the future of the town as well, and give them a much better environment to grow up in, and a much better environment where they can develop, and linking it with local industry will give job opportunities as well. And I'm really keen to stress that it's a really important part of our town's fund.
Absolutely. I think it's very much needed, the youth facility, and to, accommodate things that will keep them on the right track, and, guide them into future employment, and keep these youngsters out of trouble, basically. And it's very much needed. And I will submit my services wherever I can, Peter, in helping it along, and to provide future services. If I can give my time, I will. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate your comments.
Right. Yeah. Wendy's just pointed out to me that we should suspend the standing orders, because we're approaching. Well, we're 8:24 at the moment. So if all members in agreement, and I did say last time when we were in chamber that we should really be here until business is finished. Are you guys all okay with that? Because as far as I can see tonight, we're kind of all here, apart from Councillor Van Day. I believe we're missing. He's absent without leave, Councillor Van Day tonight. So if you're in agreement, guys, just.
Agreed.
Well, questions to other members, because I've taken up enough time on the Tilbury plan. Who did we open up to? Councillor Kerrin again, number one.
Thank you, Chair. Glad you see me as number one. It's very close to my heart. Peter, thank you very much for this report. It's really, really positive, especially myself as someone who grew up in Tilbury. To me, it doesn't just look like a map. It's actually places I can visualise and places where I've spent a large proportion of my life. With that in mind, just when do you think Tilbury residents are going to start seeing physical aspects of this plan, which is going to sort of make them be convinced that finally things are happening in the town? Because we all know about sort of 3 years ago they said about Calcutta, doing stuff along Calcutta Road and things like that, and to date we haven't really seen anything. So when do you think Tilbury residents are going to be able to walk down the street and notice the difference that this has made?
I mean, David's probably going to answer your question sort of directly in terms of timing, because there is a time limit on when this money's got to be spent once you get it. So it does have to move relatively quickly. As you can imagine, these are pretty substantial projects in their own right. So they're going to take a few years to come to fruition, and we obviously have to build a business plan once we get the funding. I think the exciting thing is that this is a real genuine opportunity to get 25 to 30 million pound for Tilbury, and we need to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity for this. So as long as what we put in is good enough to convince local government department that we should get the funding, then intention will be to move as quickly as possible. And I suppose one of the areas where we are is with the accelerated fund. Now, you're not going to see massive change with the accelerated fund, but that is £500,000 that is being spent now and has to be spent by the end of March. But that's being spent on stuff that probably doesn't immediately excite people, like knocking down the fire station, maybe improving some of the shop fronts in the Civic Square, for example. But some of the bigger projects, and we focused on, as you can see, 3 or 4 really big projects here, these will all make a really big difference. And our intention as a board will be to move as quickly as possible, because we're time limited on when we've got to spend the money effectively. So government gives you the money and says you need to spend it by X year. And David can probably give you I can't remember off the top of my head, David, the timetable on that.
Yeah, through you, Chair, just to support that. There's 2 elements to it, Councillor. One is, as Peter explained, we've got the accelerated funding, which has to be spent by the 31st of March next year. So that's for some of the smaller bits, including the demolition of the fire station, but also there's some essential equipment going into the youth centre in Tilbury. There's running trails and outdoor gyms and things like that are a forerunner for some of the bigger schemes that are coming up. And then it's the process that we're into as we submit the town investment plan in January, by the end of January. Then we go through this sort of process with the government where they look at what we submitted, comment on it, we go backwards and forwards, we start to develop the business cases, go through a town deal process, and then it's possibly within a year or so we get the funding, and then it's normally a 3-year period to get the money up and running. The degree of uncertainty is how long it takes to get from the submission of the tip to actually when we get the town deal funding. I just don't know, but let's call it 6 months to a year. That sort of timescale roughly.
Thank you, David. And you got any further questions, Councillor Kerrin, or? Right, can I ask any other members got any questions? Councillor Gerrish?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor, other than to, again, welcome the report on both Grays and Tilbury. I think some really potentially exciting things there, and I think we just need to make sure as we go through this that there really is that benefit realised for residents, but be good to monitor this as we go forward. Thanks very much.
Absolutely, Councillor, I totally agree with you. Okay, right, so if there's no further questions on this, are all members in agreement with the recommendations outlined within the report? Andy, you've got your hand up there, sir?
Yes, Chair, just before you go to the vote, just to reiterate again the point, in addition to the recommendations set out in the report, the additional proposal that, with the support of the committee, a letter goes in support of the bid, alongside the Greys one as well, Chair. So just to add that to the list of recommendations. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I do hope sincerely that our Member of Parliament is really pushing to see these developments take place. You know, these projects, they really need to come to fruition, and I sincerely hope that our MP Jackie Doyle-Price is absolutely pushing to so we can see this happen. Thank you. Okay, are we all in agreement then that the recommendations are outlined in this report, and we will be sending through the supporting letters as well? All in agreement. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all, and thank you, Peter. I really do appreciate what you're doing. Thank you. And if we can...
Thank you, Chair.
And if we can move on to item 11, is the Purfleet Centre regeneration. And again, can I ask the officers to introduce the report, please?
Yes, Chair, I'll introduce this one and can be relatively brief, because however important this one is, the scope of this one is relatively narrow. But before I do, just reflecting on this evening's meeting, and totaling up the various schemes that we've had in front of you this evening, they amount to somewhere in the region of £250 million worth of investment in the borough. The individual schemes and proposals are all very important, but if you look at it collectively, I think just in one meeting, you can see the amount of interest there is in terms of investment in the borough. channeled in the right way, which will make the place even more prosperous and an even better place to live. So just an overall reflection on what has been a very interesting agenda. So in terms of this final report of the evening, Chair, members will know well the Purfleet Centre regeneration scheme granted outline permission well over a year ago now, and a couple of consents for detailed permission, one granted already and one in the pipeline. So it's a project that has got planning permission and is beginning to move forward into delivery mode. Members will have also seen previous announcements of £75.1 million worth of investment through the Housing Infrastructure Fund for this particular project, which again can only be welcomed in terms of being able to see that delivery take place. And this report is solely around two elements that need to take place to secure that funding. Firstly, the completion of a grant determination agreement with Homes England to enable the money to be drawn down. And secondly, and related, changes to the existing development agreement with PCRL to ensure that the council can maintain its contractual obligations under the Housing Infrastructure Fund, and also to support the delivery of the scheme. So it's just those two elements, Chair, that will see the funding being able to be drawn down, and as I say, then a good chance of us seeing some accelerated delivery on this important regeneration project. Thank you.
Right, thank you for the report, Andy. We are aware that this has been signed off, and you know, these 3,000 new homes that are proposed, and I do believe you said there's about £75 million investment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the investment that is subject to this particular report, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, Andy. We did speak, you know, in the pre-meeting that I still hold concerns. It's the west of the borough, and from time to time, well, you know, not too frequent, hopefully, but we see that side of our borough, the west side of our borough, come to complete standstills and gridlock, where something goes wrong on the bridge or something goes wrong on the A13 and the M25. We still don't have the east-facing slips that would carry traffic away from Lakeside. So, you know, there's still concerns there that we're putting more homes into an already sort of busy side of our borough. I know you've noted my concerns before, but I just wondered if any other members have similar concerns regarding this regeneration. Andy, would you like to come back on my comments?
Sorry, Chair, I thought you were asking members whether they had similar concerns to you. I clearly understand your concerns that relate to any major development, but ones which were fully considered at the time of the grant of outline planning permission. Is there a need for further infrastructure as time develops? You mentioned other parts of the borough in close proximity, possibly so, and we'll look for those opportunities as they arise. But fundamentally, this is a site with a bona fide planning permission that's gone through due process, has got a initial phase 1A proposal already consented in terms of the details and other schemes in. So yeah, I fully understand your concerns. They're not matters that this report is focused on. This report is simply to do with the receipt of the £75.1 million Housing Infrastructure Fund and the two bits of documentation that need to be sorted out to allow that to be drawn down in the terms of the grant determination agreement and the changes to the development agreement. That is the focus of this report this evening. But yeah, I do understand those concerns that will relate to any development of this sort of size and scale. All I can do is assure you and the committee that those matters were fully and properly taken into consideration at the time of the grant of planning permission.
Thank you, Andy. And we'll open up to members' questions, and perhaps if you do share the same concerns, perhaps you can, put that into your, your questions. Who's first, Wendy? Councillor Gerrish is first this time. You're number one, Councillor Gerrish.
Thank you, Chair. And I think, sort of, first of all, I think in the west of the borough, we always share concerns over traffic issues. And I think it'd be good always to see that we've got more work planned as a council in terms of how we intend to play our part to mitigate some of those issues. I think, though, the question of the Purfleet development is a slightly separate one on this occasion, and it's something that I think is quite unique in the borough in terms of how it's been brought about and the way of working with local residents who I think have been, wholeheartedly behind the benefits that they'll receive from this scheme as it is brought forward. So I think from my point of view, certainly remain very supportive of the scheme. I think it's something that we absolutely have to have come forward. It's absolutely something that we need to see realised as soon as possible so that we start to get those benefits on the ground for local residents in Purfleet, who I think it's fair to say have been kept waiting over the years for something that they've been very keen to see brought about. From that point of view, look, I'll continue to support anything that we need to do to ensure that scheme is delivered successfully. Andy, I wonder if you could just give us an outline. It's a slightly tangential question, but in terms of the delivery of the scheme overall, are we still relatively on track now? Is there any kind of slippage in the scheme caused by kind of COVID or other factors recently? And I guess with this decision tonight, how far are we away? Are we away from starting to see some of those benefits realised by residents?
Andy?
Chair, thank you, and some related points there. And I think that in all my years in the planning profession, I've never known a scheme of this scale get so few letters of representation when it went to committee, picking up on Councillor Gerrish's point, and of the handful of letters that we received in relation to the application, the majority were, when's it going to happen, please? Which I think is testimony to the work that's gone into getting a high quality scheme together. I think the critical point as well in terms of this evening's item is that actually the receipt of that of the HIF money will do wonders for actually sort of accelerating the delivery and getting things moving in the way that the community wants to see there. So in summary, I think that it will bring us back onto programme quickly. It will move us into delivery mode, and in the context that Councillor Gerrish has just described, that can only be a good thing.
Would you like to come back, Councillor Gerrish?
Thanks, Chair. No further questions. Thank you, Andy, for the response.
Thank you, Andy. Can we move on to any other further questions? Councillor Potter, any questions?
Not exactly a question, but I'm 100% behind you with the fact that Lakeside needs west and east facing slips. I mean, I live in Ockenden, and it's about, 5.5 miles from here. Tonight, it took me 1 hour and 5 minutes to get here. It's absolutely not good enough. It causes all the pollution as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Potter, I would emphasise on that. I mean, as the borough grows under the local plan over the next 2 decades, we're going to see more proposed homes, up to 32,000, which is only going to congest Thurrock even more, and we probably would be resembling perhaps an East London area, really, in the end. And yes, there's the pollution element. I know we're pushing forward to electric cars, but that's a long time off yet, I believe. But yeah, your concerns are shared, Councillor Potter, absolutely. And Andy, I don't know if you'd like to interject on that.
The points around the necessary infrastructure to support growth are well made. I said in introduction this evening about the fact that we've seen some significant projects in front of us this evening, which will help to build capacity and will help to provide the necessary infrastructure that's required as well. But there will be more needed as development progresses and as the growth agenda rolls out. I know that Lee Nicholson and his team gave a presentation to members last night, and I think there's another one following shortly on the Your Place, Your Voice, design charrette approaches, working with communities to identify what infrastructure is required to support growth. That will be supplemented by various bits of technical studies going forward as well. So yeah, there are points well made, and clearly growth cannot be for growth's sake, and we need to ensure that new growth in the borough is the highest quality and supported by necessary infrastructure rather than exacerbating existing problems that have been identified.
Thank you, Andy. I'd appreciate if the likes of yourself and senior officers could really push forward for those extra slips, you know, out of Lakeside, because you know, it is our kind of jewel in the crown, isn't it? Lakeside, you know, it's our shopping area. You know, I'm you know, partial to a bit of Lakeside myself. You know, a bit of retail therapy, and we really need to ensure that we can get that traffic out. You know, onto the road networks as kind of quick as possible, and not snarl up our road networks. I'm sure you'd agree. Andy?
Sorry, Chair, I was nodding in agreement, but yes, no, I absolutely. The need to address those issues are going to be incredibly important, as you know, and I know we're straying outside of this particular item, this particular project. It's been a long-held ambition to create a 21st century town centre around the shopping centre there at Lakeside. We equally know that there are a lot of challenges for the retail sector generally, which may well move some of those ambitions forward at a greater pace than we might have seen, say, a couple of years or so ago. But getting the necessary support and infrastructure in place to make sure that's delivered in a satisfactory manner is going to be absolutely imperative.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. Are there any more members that would like to ask any questions? Councillor Anderson, are you still with us?
I am indeed, Chair. No questions from myself on this one.
Okay, that's great. So if we've exhausted the debate, are all members in agreement with the recommendations outlined within this report?
Agreed.
That's all agreed. Absolutely brilliant. And I'll move on to item 12. Thank you. We'll now move on to the work programme, which is located at on page 71. Right, we've got what we got. October, December, so Andy, would you like to take us through the remaining work programme?
Thank you, Chair. So you'll see from the back of the agenda that there is quite a lengthy list of potential items to the final meeting of the municipal year in February. I think some of those items we could potentially deal with via briefing notes, Chair, because there is clearly more than is manageable here. but the number of these reports will be ready for you. I guess the question back to members this evening: is there anything of particular urgency, bearing in mind the context of the length of this list already, that members would like to see at the next meeting added to the work programme? If that can be indicated, then I'll take away with the officers for discussion with you, Chair, about how we're going to manage that particular committee. And as I say, look to the use of briefing notes as appropriate. Thank you.
Right, are all members in agreement with that? Or any members got any comments regarding the work programme? Sure. Councillor Kerrin, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I think the number of items on this list just show how important this committee is. They're all very sort of important. They've all got a lot of implications to them. It's more of a comment, really. How are we going to make sure that during the February meeting we give each item the sort of time it deserves, and don't just because of the amount of items that are on there. It's just more about how we manage the meeting to make sure that we give it the attention it deserves.
Andy?
Yes, Chair. If I look at this list, there's a duplicate there for some reason. East facing access is repeated twice. I also think that there is a read across between certain of the items, particularly around parking strategy, lorry and freight strategy, and active travel proposals. So we can see how we can merge some of these together. And as I say, Chair, we can look for briefing notes which have been used, I know, in this committee and in other scrutiny committees as well, where appropriate. So let us look into that. The other suggestion I was going to make was that, with your agreement, Chair, and with members who are here this evening, an early start, as we have done this evening. We've had 7 items and some significant ones on this evening as well, and external presenters, and we've got through business well, I would suggest, this evening, and the early start has helped us to be able to finish at a time when our brains are all still functioning. So we'll look at how we can review, potentially amalgamate some of the items together, the use of briefing notes, but I would suggest with your agreement, Chair, as I say, a 6 o'clock start for the February meeting as well.
Yes, thank you, Andy. I totally agree. Yeah, if them services can, you'll see to that. And hopefully, Andy, we might be able to see members within the chamber. Having a physical meeting on our next February meeting. It'd be great to see you all in attendance, and us speaking to each other rather than a television screen.
I guess time and government guidance will tell on that point, Chair. But yes, it would be good if it was possible.
Well, I'll thank you all for your attendance tonight. Whether it's sorry, Councillor Potter.
Yeah, given the next meeting's going to be in February, I don't want to sound a bit tame, but could we have the heating on? Yeah. I've been freezing all night. Thank you.
Well, I'm a little bit cold, but I've been hot all day, so it's been cooling down for me. Anyway, again, I thank you, Councillor Potter. As noted, it is a little bit chilly in here. So thank you, everyone. That concludes our business of the meeting this evening, and I'll now declare the meeting closed at 20:51 hours. Thank you all. Take care. See you soon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Good evening.